That's the greatest fiction of all. And it's coming undone. We've all been taught to take. The farmers have been taught to take. The industrialists take. The rich take. The poor take. The middle class take. But where are they taking from? Themselves. What are they doing? With quite a big cut taken from the federal government, whose welfare programs are eating up 2/3 of them, 70% eaten up in bureaucracy. That's what's coming undone. But it is a libel on the human race to say this is the only way or the best way that we can interact with each other. That we can't improve our condition or that of the least among us without the government gun in the ribs. We've gotten to a point where we're going to have to, not for ideological or philosophical reasons, but for eminently practical ones, we're going to have to put the guns down and treat each other humanely, treat each other like human beings, interacting voluntarily. That is all the free market is, and that would be the first step toward genuine change we can believe in. Thank you.
Standing ovation going on here.
All right, everybody. I know we're all greedy capitalists and are just wanting more and more jewels of wisdom from Tom Woods, but unfortunately, we're just getting ready to close here. We're just going to open the floor for a brief set of question and answer, probably 10 minutes max, so keep it relevant, pertinent, and after that, we're going to the wild board for drinks, and you can ask your trivial questions there. One thing I do want to include is special thanks to ACSU for the funds to make this whole event possible. I want to thank Eric Roach and the Young Americans for Liberty, as well as Leslie Hollywood and the Tea Party, and just everyone who's helped get this whole event together. So with that, I'm going to open the floor to Tom Woods again for some question and answer.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. So the question, I'm going to repeat the questions. The question involves what kind of a free market response. Let's assume that global warming is taking place and that it's caused by human activities. Then, what kind of voluntary, free market solutions could there be? And I'll be honest enough with you to say that I really don't know what the answer to that is, but I do know somebody who does know the answer. That's the second best thing, and that's my friend Robert Murphy. He was the guy who played the zombie in the zombie video. It turns out that he's a PhD economist who's willing to do that to his own dignity just to help a friend. But I would go to his site and do searches for that, because I know he's written a paper on specifically this question, and I've always been meaning to do it, and I've always thought, someday somebody's going to ask me this, and I wish I had read this paper. But I think there are ways. I mean, obviously, you could just say to people, look, this is super urgent, and you just have to start doing it, and then maybe people will do it. But then people will say, that's just not enough. In this case, we need to have coercion. But his website is consultingbyrpm.com. And just look at his blog and do a search. I wish I could give a better answer, but maybe what I'll do is, in the next 24 hours or so, I'll also try and go through his site, and I'll post on my own site some links that'll try to answer, because I feel bad not knowing, but I don't know everything. But I'll try and post that. That's at tomwoods.com. I'll post that stuff. And that'll link to him, so we'll both be happy. We'll both get some internet hits. Okay. All right, how about an easier question? Yeah, sure.
All right. I apologize, but one thing I forgot to mention. We are passing around clipboards with spaces to sign. for people who are interested in bringing Ron Paul to campus. So, so make sure you do it. Make sure you get a clipboard and make sure you sign it. They're being passed around right now. So, anyway, right over there.
Wait, before we take that question, let me just say, I just want to make sure and clarify that the one kind of question I just can't answer, and I'm not even saying this as a joke, is what should I do with my money? I don't know either. I don't know, just try and rely on people you trust at this stage of things. But I heard one money manager say, well, there are two positions in an economy like this, a cash position and a fetal position. All right, I'm sorry, yes, please. Well, one thing that'll be really interesting to see is Ron Paul heading up this important subcommittee now, which I never thought I would have. Oh, I DVR'd Freedom Watch the other night. My wife and I just watched that one segment. Yeah, that is great. So, I mean, to be perfectly blunt, there's nothing that individuals can do. Again, repeating the question, what can we do about the fact that the Fed is engaged in the $600 billion policy and all that? The answer is really there's nothing we can do. But the only thing we can do, I suppose, that we can't directly affect it, but we can keep the pressure on in ways that has never been. There's never been pressure on the Federal Reserve Chairman to go on television to defend himself, to hire a PR firm, which they did during the audit of the Fed thing. Of course, they have such a tin ear, they hired the same firm that Enron hired. They can't even do that right. But the fact that little cartoon video about quantitative easing, I don't even know, they're like androgynous animals in the sense, like, I don't even know what animals they are. Are they teddy bears? Are they puppies? I don't know what they are. But they're talking about this, and this thing got, like, millions of hits. A thing critical to the Federal Reserve making fun of Ben Bernanke. I would say that, maybe our efforts aren't enough to stop the thing, but that's no reason not to continue with the efforts, because heck, I'm having a lot of fun with this. I think it's great that these guys are actually worried that the general public is catching on to what they're doing, and then if it could be that in 2012 we could have among Republican candidates, we could have two people who are anti-Fed. When has that happened in any presidential election ever in history? So it doesn't, it can't answer all questions, it can't solve everything, but, everything has to start with little steps. And we're actually seeing much bigger steps than any of us had the right to expect. The very fact that people can actually say, well, my local End the Fed chapter is doing something. What? But what's also very interesting is that even though Milton Friedman endorsed Ron Paul when he was alive, when Friedman was alive, and Friedman was not an Austrian, he believed in the Fed. He wouldn't necessarily support all the things the Fed is doing now, but some of them would have. But nevertheless, when I travel in these circles, and I give, we have events like this, or I go to a university, or we have these conferences, or Ron Paul gives a big speech, and I talk to people to the extent that they're interested in economics and they're aware, they're all anti-Fed Austrians. I have not one time, I have shaken so many hands and signed so many books, and I have not one time run into somebody who said, I love Ron Paul, what he's up to, but I'm a Chicago school economist and I disagree with him on the Fed. Not even once. In academia, they're still very significant, and they still do some good work in other areas, but among the general public, they've been completely routed. Among the freedom people, they're all anti-Fed. That has become the default position. That was not the case before. If you were anti-Fed, even some of the freedom people, even some of the think tanks, treated you as some kind of crank. We just need a nicer Fed. We need one that's on more of a short leash. What's the matter with you? Whereas now, all these institutions are trying to jump on the anti-Fed bandwagon. So, amidst all this, we do have reason to be pleased with our progress. Okay, but do we have time for one more? I'm sorry I went on for so long. I never go on for that. Oh, that's good. That's nice. Okay, wait, one more. Yeah, oh, well, I'm not calling on the people, so you want to pick that. Yeah, okay. So the question about the 1920-21 depression, something I've written about, you can find as a video. And again, I mean, the dorks of the world are my bread and butter because it's been viewed over 100,000 times. It was a talk I gave here in Colorado Springs in April on the Great Depression of 1920, why you've never heard of it. You never heard of it because, in fact, one of the things that I like that Grover Norquist has said was that a depression is a recession the government tried to cure. I wish I had thought of that, because man, that's a good one. But in the 1920 thing, they didn't try to cure it. And so what I've argued, if you go to YouTube, you type in Woods 1920, or in my book Meltdown, I got a discussion of it. You know, you've got double-digit unemployment, you've got production way down, you've got wholesale prices falling very dramatically, and all these indications. And we didn't have fiscal stimulus. I mean, there were tax cuts. That's a kind of fiscal stimulus. But they didn't kick in until basically the recovery was already underway. We didn't have a stimulus package in the form of increased government spending. They cut the government budget 50% between 1920 and 1922. The Federal Reserve did not, and you can see this on their own graphs. The St. Louis Fed allowed you to generate graphs of monetary policy. You can generate a graph showing they didn't do anything to reverse the money supply decline until, again, 1922, after the Depression was over. And so Joseph Schumpeter, who was not an Austrian economist, he was an Austrian economist, but not an Austrian economist, if you follow me. He was a fellow traveler, I suppose. He was a sympathizer in some way. But one of the great economists of the 20th century, Schumpeter said that the 1920 Depression alone is evidence in and of itself that the economy does indeed recover. It doesn't adjust itself in the absence of any outside stimulus. So what can we learn from this today? Well, of course, the economy was able to adjust so quickly in that case, partly because we had a much more free market economy at that time. There were fewer obstacles in the way. Whereas today we have some interference in wages, we have a lot more, we have the unemployment insurance thing, we have a lot of things that might get in the way of an immediate adjustment in employment. But still, I mean, it does indicate, I mean, there has to be a reason they never mentioned this episode. You know, they're afraid that we peons might get some ideas. We can't have that. So the very fact that we have evidence that a hands-off policy did not result in a lifelong recession and a continuing downward deflationary spiral into the center of the earth, we didn't have that. Whereas the very first time, as Bob Murphy puts it, the very first time the federal government said, hey, we've got to really roll up our sleeves and fix this thing. We've got the longest depression in history. You know, if we don't see a lesson in that, then we just ain't paying attention. All right, I guess that's it for tonight, but we're going to the wild boar. I've never heard of it. Is it a coffee? What is it? Really?
Well, it's a coffee shop, but you don't have to bring your own supplies. I think they have to.
I was going to say, you call it the wild boar, and all you have is coffee. I mean, that's a little bit false advertising. But first of all, but I do just want to say to everybody that I realize that when people hear there's a lecture going on, it's very hard to get people to attend something like this. So I want to thank you for taking, you know, I mean, your nights are precious to you. I know that because every night with me, it's like non-negotiable. I got to be with my kids. And so you took this night to be with me, and it's a real honor, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right, good question.